Hello, I'm Karma Kitaj, your host for A Livelihood, New Careers as We Age. And today we're going to meet Bruce Bell, who's going to tell us about his journey from being a math professor and then a college administrator to something entirely new.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yes, I'm happy to have you here, Bruce. And so we were saying that I originally heard about you from people at Stonewall Center, which is, if not the first, well, I think the first or maybe the only lifelong learning center for gays and lesbians, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, and then I heard you speak at Discover What's Next not too long ago, so I was intrigued by your story. And I know you've told me that you worked at Cape Cod Community College here in Massachusetts.
Yep.
And why don't you tell me a little bit what you did there?
Well, at the college, and I it might help to just back up a little bit and tell you it's kind of amazing to me that I kind of have changed and sought out a new career, because I grew up in a family where change was certainly not something that was, we were as against change, I guess, as you could possibly be. My father worked for the same company for 35 years. Mm-hmm. My mother and father built the house right before they got married and lived in the house for all of their married life. My father passed away in '95. My mother continued to live there until about 4 years ago. And she's 92 and now lives in a kind of assisted living facility, but still is in good shape and so forth. But and then even for our vacations every summer, we always did the same vacation. My father's sister owned a cabin on a lake in Maine, so we would always go up there for 2 weeks, every single summer. So I grew up in a family, where change was not something certainly sought out, certainly not changing careers. So I decided that I wanted to teach, and so I made some applications. And this is kind of always how it's worked for me. When I went for the interview at Cape Cod Community College, the minute I kind of drove into the place, it just had some kind of karma about it that just made me feel this is where I want to work. So
it sounds like you're someone who probably has learned to trust his instincts.
Yeah, I think that's true. When it's very difficult for me to think of change. It somehow kind of happens. I don't plan for it. I mean, segueing to what happened when I finally left the college, the reason I left was that there was an early retirement incentive for state employees, and in my particular case, it actually maxed out my retirement, which was kind of too good to pass up. I would have had to wait probably another 5 to 6 years to be able to get to that same point if I stayed at the college. So I had this view that, I'll ride my bike to the beach, I'll read books, I'll just kind of not do much of anything. I'll just kind of, for the first time, really enjoy, having the time off to do whatever I want to do. And George kept saying to me, well, what's your plan for retirement? You've got to think this thing through.
He was still working, you said.
Yes, he was also still working, which was another whole issue. But he also kept saying, you really got to have a plan, or, you may find that you don't like it. Well, I guess it turns out that even though I'm actually, as a mathematician, I'm a very logical thinker. When it comes to issues like this, I somehow have to experience it before I know what works and what doesn't work. So, again, it didn't take too long after I was retired to realize this wasn't going to work for me. There were a lot of attempts to change marriage into civil unions in Massachusetts, and the legislature was considering some of these alternatives, and GLAAD, among other organizations, was looking for people to testify in front of the legislature.
So let's just clarify that GLAAD is Gay, Lesbian Advocates and Defenders.
Right, Gay, Lesbian Advocates and Defenders. And They're primarily a legal organization, but they also do some advocacy work with the legislature. And so I called, or glad, I forget how it happened, but I agreed to write testimony for GLAAD and to be one of the people who would testify kind of for their organization. And I did that, and I worked with one of the attorneys who left recently, Michelle Granda, and she kind of helped me with my testimony. And so and George and I had given to GLAAD over the years anyway, and because GLAAD was the organization that won the right for us to marry, it kind of had a special place for both of us in our hearts. So I began to think, well, you know, wouldn't it be really nice to be able to work for an organization that has done so much for the LGBT community, and to give something back, to feel that the work I was doing was valuable. And also, I was hoping to be working for an organization where I'd feel very comfortable and would basically be a really nice, fun organization to work for. So I remember as we were getting closer to the wedding, thinking, you know, the more I thought about it, the more I really came to settle on the position, which at that time was called the Hotline Coordinator and is now the Legal Infoline Manager, but that would be really kind of an ideal position for me because it involved training volunteers, it involved education, so I could capitalize on my past experience in education.
So you are training volunteers?
I do.
Now?
I have to recruit, train the volunteers along with the legal staff. They do a lot of the content.
Can you give some examples of the kinds of
things we get,
things that people call in for?
It can be anything from someone has lost their job and they feel it was because they were gay or that they were HIV positive or that they were transgender. It can be that people were told to leave a place like a restaurant or a bar, again, and they perceive it was because of their sexual orientation and not some other reason. We get couples, lesbians who've had a child calling, asking about what they can do to make their family as protected as possible. Because even though we have marriage now in Massachusetts and several other states, there are a lot of states that won't recognize those marriages, and so if couples travel outside of kind of the protected states, you quickly can not have the rights to protect your family. So we can get calls like that. We can get calls from people who are in kind of criminal situations looking for an attorney. We get calls from people with who are HIV positive, who have had their privacy violated. And so it's or just calls from people who want to create some legal documents and want an attorney who will understand their particular issues. So it's a great service, I think, to the public, and it's free, and it's a free service.
And it's free, But it sounds like it's really, you found a match for yourself, even though it's not something that you even thought about when you were retiring. You know, you had to go through this journey to discover what it would be. Well, I'd like to hear more, but we have to stop. So thank you so much for coming.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for coming.